Welcome to We Learn, Virtual Learning Network. This is session number 31 of the subject The Study of Society, and the chapter is Social Deviance. Topics to be covered are meaning and nature of deviance, basic types of deviance and deviance, explanations of deviation. Meaning and nature of deviance. The study of deviance cannot be undertaken without reference to norms. Norms are prescribed standards which guide and regulate behavior. They are accepted by the group and shared by group members. Human society permits certain variations in the behavior demanded by the norms. Essentially, these variations are well defined by the cultural norms of the society concerned. So, basically, the study of deviance cannot be just undertaken without reference to norms and standards. So, norms are prescribed standards which guide and regulate human behavior and which are accepted by the group and shared, and also that they are accepted, and they are also human society also permits certain variations in the behavior demanded by the norms. Difficulty in defining deviance. Norms are not the same everywhere. They vary from group to group, within a group, and over a period of time, and also place to place. It's not easy to identify those behaviors that are universally defined as departures from some norm or norms. Behaviors, notions, and products of human interaction can be understood or evaluated only within the context of the culture and society of which they are a part. A relativistic view of deviance implies that deviance can be interpreted only in the socio-cultural context in which it occurs. Variations in the definition of deviance. Variation by time. An act considered deviant in one time period may be considered non-deviant in another time period in a society. So the time also matters. Variation by culture. Behavior viewed as deviant in one location or culture or may be considered non-deviant in another. So deviant behavior, which basically means that non-conforming to the rules, regulations, and standards of society. If one is not conforming to the rules, behavior, and the standards of society, then in one culture it may be considered deviant, in another culture it may not be considered deviant. Variation by social position. Deviance can also vary with social status. Certain behaviors are given greater approval for men than women. So, deviance can also vary with the help with the gender and with social status also. And certain behaviors are given greater approval for men, but approval is not given for women. So, there are different variations of time, culture, as well as social position. Three types of deviance: cultural and psychological deviation. In cultural deviation, one departs from the norms of a culture, while the psychological deviant deviates from the norms in personality organization. So, in cultural deviation, one departs from the norms of a culture, one goes away from the norms and set rules of a culture, and in the psychological deviation, one deviates from the norms in personality organization. Individual and group deviation. An individual deviation, the person deviates from the norms of a subculture, and in a group deviation the person deviates from the norms or the rules of the group. Primary and secondary deviation. Primary deviance refers to the violation of social norms committed by a person who is not labeled as a deviant and who is basically a conformist in his or her life. So primary deviance refers when the violation of social norms is committed by a person and who is not labeled as a deviant, and basically he or she is a conformist in his or her life, but he or she commits violation of social norms. 5 types of deviance. Freak. The freaks are those who stand at the extreme ends of the normal curve. So, freaks are the extreme ends of the normal curve who stand. Sinful. The deviant as sinful is adjudged as such on the basis of religious ideological codes, commandments, texts, and doctrines. Criminal. The criminal deviant is defined according to the legal codes, particularly the criminal law. Sinful is adjudged on the basis of religious ideological codes, commandments, and also texts and doctrines. Freak is who stand at the extreme ends of the normal curve, who does not have any conformity to the rules. Sick is the conception of deviant as sick is based on a disease model and defined in the pathological framework. Alienated, the definition of deviant as alienated persons focuses on certain categories of social dropouts such as hippies. So basically, the definition of deviant as alienated persons or isolated people, and they are known as social dropouts, and they are also known as hippies. In the modern industrial society, many people feel estranged and isolated from the values and norms of the society. Many people feel isolated and away from the values and norms whatever society gives, and they are the termed and they come in the alienated category. Explanations of deviation. Scientists have offered a variety of theories to explain deviance. Biological theories tend to focus on hereditary, anatomical, or physiological factors. Psychological explanations tend to discuss on personality, movies, aggression, frustration, and other subjective factors. Sociologists usually emphasize socio-cultural factors. So sociologists focus on socio-cultural factors, and biological theories focus on hereditary, and psychological on aggression and personality. Biological explanations. Biological theories of deviance are generally traced back to the Italian physician psychiatrist Lombroso. Lombroso was interested in the scientific study of crime. Lombroso found that the inmates displayed certain physical abnormalities such as deviations in head size and shape, eye defects, receding chins, and excessively long arms. The 1940s, the American psychologist physician Sheldon attempted to link body type to behavior. He classified people in terms of three types of physique: the endomorph, who is soft, round, and usually fat; the mesomorph, who is muscular, stocky, and athletic; and the ectomorph, who is skinny and fragile. So the endomorphs are soft as well as fat. Mesomorph is muscular and athletic. Ectomorphs are skinny, very thin, and fragile. Psychological explanations lay emphasis on the mind of the individual rather than on body types. One group of psychological explanations associates deviance with sickness, arguing that deviance results from a psychological abnormality or a mental illness. Frustration over lack of money can lead to aggressive actions, child abuse, robbery, even murder. So all these are psychological explanations offered by the psychologists that deviance can also be occurred because of psychological explanations, and sickness or psychological abnormality can be some of the reasons. The psychoanalytic theories of deviation are based on the works of Freud from 1856 to 1939. Freudian theories linked deviance with defects in the superego or conscience. People with weak egos were said to be unable to control their impulse or follow planned rational courses of action. So basically, Freudian theorists linked deviance with defects in the superego or in the conscience of the individuals, and the people with weak egos are unable to control their impulses and or follow a planned rational course of action. Sociological explanations. Sociological theories attempt to explain deviance by looking at the socio-cultural context of deviance. Anomy theory, it focuses on value conflicts between culturally prescribed goals and socially approved ways of achieving them. So anomy theories are basically value conflicts between culturally prescribed goals and socially approved ways. Socio-cultural learning theories are concerned with the way people interact and learn deviance. Labeling theory focuses on the meanings, definitions, and interpretations applied to action. Conflict theory contends that groups in power define the acts of the weaker groups as deviant in order to exploit them. So groups in power define the acts of the weaker groups as to be deviant and in order to exploit them. Labeling theory focuses on the meanings, definitions, and interpretations applied to action. Socio-cultural learning can be in the way people interact, and anomy theory focuses on value conflicts. Anomy is the concept of anomy has been very important for developing a general theory of deviant behavior. Anomy literally means normlessness. Anomy refers to a social and cultural condition in which there is either conflict of norms or ambivalent orientation towards norms. Ambivalent orientation, either there is conflict of norms taking place, either there are no norms, or when there are some norms, they are conflicting with each other. The credit for bringing out the implications of anomy for a general theory of deviant behavior goes to the American sociologist Robert K. Merton. Merton identified two important elements of social and cultural structures. Let's take the cultural goals, purposes, and interests. These culturally prescribed goals are held out as legitimate objectives for all the members of society. Actual structures also provide the accepted modes or ways of reaching these goals. The theory of anomie seeks to explain the rates and pattern of deviant behavior in different societies. As Merton has himself noted, many countries much poorer than the United States, such as India, have lower rates of crime. The low rate of crime in India, despite its poverty, can be attributed to the fact that poverty alone does not operate in the same manner in each society. So, in different societies, poverty operates in the different manner. Socio-cultural learning theories. These theories focus on those processes through which deviant acts are learned and the conditions under which learning takes place. So these theories focus on those processes through which deviant acts are learned. These theories emphasize presence of groups that people belong to and how they learn the norms prescribed by those groups. So basically these groups emphasize presence of groups that people belong to and also how they learn the norms prescribed by those groups. Subculture or cultural transmission theory, the differential association theory, and the labeling theory are the subcategories of the socio-cultural learning theories. Labeling theory looks specifically at the consequences of labeling a person deviant. Attention is focused on the nature of origin of social norms and on the social reaction to labels aimed at those whose behavior departs from these norms. The main premise of the approach is twofold. It directs attention to the fact that social deviance, as defined by social norms, is relative. The role of those involved in labeling a person as deviant is itself an independent variable in creating or leading to deviance. The conflict theory, it argues that most societies have many groups which have different, often conflicting values. The strongest groups in a society have the power and authority to define the values of weaker and subordinate groups as deviant. So basically, conflict theory, it has basically many groups and often conflicting values, and the strongest groups in society, they have the power to define the values of the weaker groups as being deviant. Queenie, for instance, describes crime as that human conduct which is desired by authorized agents in a politically organized society. Conflict theory has its own critics as well. It does not search for causes. It does not explain the crimes and deviance that are basically non-political. It assumes that in the utopian communist society, murder, robbery, rape, and other crimes will disappear after the power to criminalize them is abolished. So basically, conflict theory had their own critics, and it says that it does not make causes relevant, and it does not explain the crimes, and also it assumes a utopian communist society. So that was all about social deviance being away from not following the prescribed norms and values of a certain group. So these are some of the questions you have to do it yourself. Question number 1, what do you mean by deviance, and what are the major types of explanations generally given for deviance? That's all. Thank you. Happy learning. We learning.